Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Thomas Vick, and joined by your other co-host, Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. Thanks for taking the time to chat through launching law firms. And, we were kind of chatting just before we started recording about thinking back in time to when we were making those decisions of, do you start your own firm? Do you join a firm? Do you do those kind of things? So I thought it might be good for us to just kind of chat a little bit about that today in terms of what are some of the thoughts that we went through. And really, if you're sort of thinking about that as an opportunity for yourself,
well,
how do you get
I
started?
think in trying to discuss how do you get started, the starting point is knowing what your motivation is, knowing your why. Why do you want to go into the law practice? Is it because, you want control over the law firm? You want to control the kind of cases that you take in? Or is it something where you've just kind of gotten jaded by another, working for a partner that maybe is a little bit too demanding on you? Kind of what is your motivation for going into law practice for yourself? I think that it starts with that, and I think at the heart of it, you're going to have a motivation to serve people. That's got to be the number one priority going into law practice. You're willing to serve others, even if you don't necessarily get paid for it immediately the way that you would hope for. So you just have to prepare yourself for some sacrifices. I think that's the starting point. And then, once you've kind of made that decision, then you start thinking about, well, what do I have to get? What tools do I need to acquire? What connections do I need to make in order to make this thing a success?
Yeah, and I would think too, just one of the things that's super helpful for me when I'm thinking through anything that I can't quite get my head around yet is I grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and I start writing down stuff that comes to mind. It's not super scientific or even that efficient, if you will. We're not using a bunch of technology tools, but just start getting the thoughts from my head into something I can look at and review. And then that helps sort of frame all the things that are on my mind. And I can start organizing that a little bit better and going, oh, okay, well, what about this piece? Okay, office space. Well, I'm not going to answer that question today, so let's just put that off to the side. Banking. Well, maybe I could figure out the next piece on the banking side, so let me put that off to the side. Where will I get clients? Well, I don't know that answer as we're sitting here, so maybe we'll think that through. But what kind of practice would I like to have, and what kind of clientele could that be? And so you start writing that down, and then you start making a list of who might be a potential client, right? So it's kind of just the old brainstorming kind of thing. If you have a whiteboard or something, put that up on the wall. But good old legal pad and pen will kind of get you started on just everything that you're kind of thinking about or have questions about. Just get it out and start looking at it, and you'll start seeing some patterns develop. And hopefully then you go, oh, well, I can maybe take the next step on one of these things and start figuring out who that is or what that next action is.
It might be, just to kind of formalize what you've discussed, is putting together a business plan. We haven't really talked much about putting a business plan together on the podcast, but I remember when I was in my third year of law school, I took a law practice management course, and it was a semester-long course. But one of the final project that we had to do instead of a final exam was to submit a business plan for starting your own law firm. How are you going to be able to do that? And it talks about all the things that you just mentioned, like what's going to be your plan for office space? What's going to be your plan for networking? What's going to be your plan for technology? What kind of subscriptions are you going to need to have? All of those things, you need to have an idea of what your approach is going to be to those items in order to kind of put together a successful endeavor in starting your law practice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I'm joined by your co-host, Seth Wilson. I'm Thomas Vick. We're here talking about some law practice management issues. And specifically today, we wanted to talk about what do you need to do to get started with your own law practice? How do you hang your own shingle? And so we wanted to kind of open up that topic today and discuss some ideas that you might take to get started.
Thomas, what a important topic. There's so much time or so many times in life that you're thinking about an idea or trying to figure out like, hey, I think this thing's the right thing to do, but I don't know. And I think you and I were talking before we started recording about trying to identify when is the right time to get started. And oftentimes you don't even know what next step to take. And I think one of the things that always helps me in that scenario is to grab a pad of paper, usually a legal pad, and a pen, and just start writing some stuff down. And whatever comes to mind, just kind of let the brain dump happen, if you will. Get it all out in front of you, and then start organizing it into pieces that you can take action on. So you may write down things like office space and realize, well, I can't really solve that problem right now, but I will need to address that in the future. But maybe it's office space, home, or rent a place, or buy a building, or whatever. You can write down some things associated with that. Then what kind of practice do you want to have? What kind of practice areas are you thinking about? And maybe what or who could be a client of your firm and your service offerings and those kind of things. As you kind of go through that, you'll realize, well, I need a bank account. And what kind of bank account do I need? And do I need a trust account? How do I do that? But you don't have to have the answers to everything. Just start the list and start making some progress that way, I think. And then from there, that's not super technical or formal, but then it can maybe morph into something a little bit more formal.
Yeah, and I have mentioned to you before that when I was a third-year law student, I had a law practice management class, and in that class we had to do a final project, which was our business plan for our law practice. And I'm sure that all the things that you just listed had to be, included in the business plan, such as office space, technology, networking, what kind of bank accounts you need to have, what rules apply to client trust accounts. All of that kind of stuff had to be in the business plan. And I think that's just a great thought process for me to go through, just to kind of think through all of those different issues that you addressed there. And it gave me an idea that, it is really a doable thing. This isn't something that, you just can't accomplish. People have done it in the past, and you can do it. You've got the acumen to be able to accomplish starting a law practice. You just have to have the fortitude and the determination to do it. But I think putting that business plan together is really important. I remember in one of I think it was my law practice management class, they talked about, well, you might need to have a business plan for getting a loan, and maybe you need a loan in order to just start the business. Maybe you don't, I don't know, but that may be something that you need for the bank to approve the loan. And so going through that process of how you're going to get from point A to point B is going to be helpful not only for you, but also it might motivate some potential lenders to help you get started.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, where reaching out to a malpractice insurance provider and getting an application will actually help define what you're doing with your firm. And same principle applies. If you're thinking about getting a loan, you could ask a bank for an application for a small business loan. And the types of things that you'll need to answer for yourself in your practice are going to be listed in that application. And it serves as a checklist. And it'll maybe bring to light something you didn't think about before. How am I going to define profit? How am I going to bring in enough to cover my normal monthly expenses? Oh, I forgot I may need fill in the blank, a copy machine, and that's more expensive this way or that way if I lease it or buy it. And so it will actually help sort of crystallize what needs to actually be done in order to get things off the ground. But I think at its essence, the thought rolling around in your head needs to get out of your head and out in front of you to where you can start seeing and acting on those things. And so maybe you say, the next thing I need to do is make a list of other small firm lawyers or solo lawyers that I know and go get together with them and ask them what they did to get started. And we're sort of doing that on a more broad scale here with the podcast, but that's one of the things I think we're really looking forward to, is just listening to people's stories and gaining that experience and passing that along to others who want to do the same thing and provide that client service in their communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point about reaching out to other attorneys and getting their experience and getting their insight and how they got started. That can kind of show you what kind of path you need to take in order to be successful. From a personal standpoint, going to the Indiana State Bar Association solo and small firm, retreat that they have down in French Lick, Indiana, was a great start for me. I went down to that, I think, 2 years in a row, 2015 and 2016. And boy, I was like a sponge. I made so many notes, and just I think I can remember every single one of the seminars that I went to, because I just needed so much guidance and how to get started. And, we may have lawyers that are not in the state of Indiana. They don't have that ability to come to French Lick, Indiana, but I'm sure that many state bar associations have a similar program that can help lawyers get started with their own law practice. And I think you take advantage of those resources.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, Thomas, because if there's a particular area of practice that you really enjoy and want to get better at, there's no better way than going to a continuing legal education seminar on that topic. And usually, like, Indiana has it set up of, hey, there's a basics seminar, and then typically there's a more advanced seminar. And so in that year or two, you may be able to get both of those in and get a pretty good understanding of that particular area of practice. And oftentimes the CLEs then will provide you with the forms related to that practice area that whoever the presenter was kind of uses in their practice. And so you can see how things are structured or get ideas for that and build your library as you're starting that practice area. I know when I was learning workers' compensation defense back many years ago, I attended the basics of understanding workers' compensation in Indiana, and then there was an advanced seminar later. And I learned so much through that process. And it took an investment of days. I think there was 1 day seminar each. And I really had to set aside the time and budget for that in terms of the cost of attending. But there's so much value. And I use those reference materials in my practice over and over. And I would reach out to the people who actually presented the material when I had a question and ask, hey, I attended your CLE. I don't know what to do with this particular area. What do I do next? And as I think one of our guests recently commented, most lawyers are more than willing to offer a helping hand to someone who's out getting started on something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking advantage of connections with other attorneys is important. That's one reason why we're friends today. You decided to kind of take me under your wing and give me a little bit of guidance as I was a fledgling lawyer, and just build relationships with people that have been there before and lean on their experience is a great way to get started. Whether it's getting some forms that you need so that you're not generating everything by on your own, and you don't have that insecurity of not knowing whether this looks right or not. Is this going to be laughed at by the judge, or is it going to be taken seriously? If you got some forms that an older attorney is willing to provide you to kind of get you started with, business formation or estate planning or a motion practice, take advantage of those. I remember I went to lunch with a lawyer that was soon to be one of the judges here locally. I didn't know that he was going to be a judge necessarily when I had lunch with him, but he was getting rid of some of his forms because he was going to be in judges' chambers. And so I got to sit and chat with him, and that kind of opportunity, you should go after.
Yeah, and like you say, some of those things just sort of fall into your lap by virtue of you being proactive and reaching out. And you may catch someone who said, "Oh, I've got this young lawyer who's getting started and I'm at a different stage of my career and transitioning, or maybe I don't do this practice area." You may build a referral source or may get a client or two from that interaction because the person that you're meeting with is going on the bench and they can no longer provide service to the client. as a result. And so you never know what doors might be opened just by you reaching out and asking. And so I think that's a really important point. Another good resource is the State Bar Association websites often have law practice management specific related topic and forms available for their members. And so you can log into that and get connected with the resources that are there, and maybe even reach out to members of the committees that are part of that. Again, but developing that network and the forms and resources that may be there. So I think those are all really good suggestions of, I'm thinking about this. I don't even know where to get started. I think the big thing is get started. It's going to take a little bit of inertia at the front end to get things and momentum going. But once you do, things start to fall into place and you'll be able to sequence the various topics that you need to address. And maybe you meet a banker at a Chamber of Commerce or Rotary or Lions event or something like that. You set a meeting and figure out, okay, what are the options? Do I need this, or do I need that? Or does this bank provide the trust account type that I need? Do I even need that to start out? How do I navigate all of those things? And so again, just the encouragement is, if you're thinking about it, start that list, figure out who you can meet with, and just get out there and start taking action.
That's right. Just write down all the ideas that you need to think about, make them into small chunks and actionable items that you can take, and just bit by bit start chopping away at starting your law practice. A lot of good things there. Definitely stuff that we can go into more detail on a later podcast, but appreciate the time as always, Seth. Where's the best place to get in touch with us?
Yeah, so easiest way to find us is on YouTube. I think it's still the number 2 search engine in the world, although I'm sure the AI stuff is starting to compete with that in some way. But we are at Lifetime Legacy Lawyers on YouTube. And we have, as of the date of this recording, email addresses. So if you want to email us, it's Seth@lifetimelegacylawyers.com or Thomas@lifetimelegacylawyers.com. We'll have that in the show notes as well. So feel free to reach out if you're just getting started, need some encouragement to kind of get over the procrastination hurdle to get things going. We'd be happy to help with that.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it, Seth. We'll talk to everybody later.
Thanks, Thomas.